Before dawn could touch the northern edge of Yellowstone, a livestock trailer quietly rolled out of the Stevens Creek facility on a March morning in 2023. Inside were not ordinary ranch animals, but 12 adult bison and one calf from the last genetically pure, free-roaming bison herd in North America. They were being carried more than 800 miles east to the Rosebud Sioux Reservation in South Dakota. There, Lakota tribal members and biologists were already waiting near the receiving pen as the morning light began to rise. To them, this was not just an animal transfer. It was the result of 15 years of preparation, patience, and hope. When the trailer door opened, the bison stepped slowly onto unfamiliar ground, breathing in the wind of a prairie that had not held wild bison for more than a century. No one standing there could have known that within just 12 months, these animals would begin changing that land in a way federal programs, conservation grants, and commercial ranching had failed to do for half a century. But what exactly happened on the Rosebud Prairie after Yellowstone's bison finally returned? To understand why that moment mattered so much, we have to go back hundreds of years, to a time when the North American plains still trembled beneath the footsteps of massive bison herds. Back then, bison were not just animals living on the prairie, they were almost the soul of the entire landscape. They moved across endless seas of grass, leaving behind dung, seeds, hoofprints, and broken soil where new life could rise again. For nearly 10,000 years, the Lakota lived alongside bison as an inseparable part of nature. They hunted only what they needed to survive, used the hides for shelter, the sinew for thread, and the bones for tools. To them, each bison was not only a source of life, but also a sacred part of their culture, ceremonies, and memory. Then the railroads arrived. Between 1870 and 1884, the herds that had once covered the horizon were slaughtered at a terrifying speed. They were killed for hides, tongues, bones, and sometimes simply for entertainment from train windows. In just one generation, tens of millions of bison were reduced to fewer than 300 wild animals. By 1884, the entire United States recorded only 23 free-roaming bison left in the wild, all of them inside the Yellowstone area. If you had lived during that time, watching a species that once filled the horizon nearly disappear within a single generation, would you still believe humans had a chance to make things right? I really want to know your answer, so leave your thoughts in the comments below. But the story did not end with bison being saved from the edge of extinction. Yellowstone became the first place in the world to legally protect this species, and from only 23 surviving animals in 1884, its bison herd grew to nearly 5,000 by the year 2000. It became the largest genetically pure, free-roaming bison herd still in existence, a conservation success that seemed impossible to deny. Yet behind that success was a contradiction almost too strange to believe. The same agencies that had spent a century rebuilding the herd were now spending millions of dollars every year to control and kill part of it. The reason was brucellosis, a disease that can spread to cattle. Whenever Yellowstone bison crossed beyond the park boundary, ranchers in Montana demanded that they be captured, killed, or sent to slaughter. So every winter, hundreds of bison were rounded up at Stevens Creek, the very place where this story began. To the government, they were excess animals that needed to be removed. But to the tribal nations, they were not surplus meat. They were relatives that had been taken from the prairie. From that very contradiction, tribal nations began searching for another path. In 1992, leaders from Sioux tribes met in Albuquerque to formally create the Intertribal Buffalo Council, with one clear mission: to bring bison back to the lands where they had once belonged. By 2024, the organization had grown to 76 tribal nations across 20 states, with a combined herd of more than 25,000 animals. But there was still one major problem. Most of the bison the tribes could access were no longer genetically pure, because many herds had been crossed with cattle during private ranching efforts in the early 1900s. The truly pure bison herd existed almost entirely in Yellowstone. For years, tribal leaders asked to receive these animals instead of watching them be sent to slaughterhouses, but they were repeatedly denied because no dedicated brucellosis quarantine process existed for bison. Only in 2016 did a turning point finally arrive. The Bison Conservation Transfer Program was created, requiring each bison to test -3 times over roughly 2 years before it could be transferred. By the end of 2024, more than 400 Yellowstone bison had left Stevens Creek and returned to tribal nations. At the Rosebud Sioux Reservation, the preparation for the bison's return had begun back in 2007. Redco, together with the World Wildlife Fund, spent years acquiring roughly 27,000 acres of native prairie, removing fences, installing water systems, selling off cattle, and transforming the land into the Wolakota Buffalo Range. In 2020, the first 100 bison were brought in, but when the Yellowstone herd arrived in 2023, the land began to witness something different. These animals were not like herds that had grown used to humans. They were not domesticated, and they did not depend on food provided by people. They rolled their bodies into the dirt, creating round wallows that held rainwater and broke open the hardened soil so native grasses could germinate. They traveled 4 to 6 miles a day, spreading dung, pressing seeds into the ground, and by the second spring, more than 40 calves had been born directly on the Wolakota Range. After just one growing season, Wolakota began to change. Native hazards like big bluestem and switchgrass started spreading again, while invasive species slowly began losing ground. The soil held more carbon, grassland birds returned to nest in the bison wallows, and in some places the groundwater level began to rise. The strange part is that while Wolakota was coming back to life, Yellowstone was still sending hundreds of bison to slaughter. The animals once treated as surplus were proving that they could awaken an entire prairie that had been sleeping for more than a century. Maybe the bison never forgot their purpose. Maybe the grass never forgot how to grow back. The only thing that needed to change was the belief that humans always had to control nature. If this story made you think, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.